Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Alessio Kolioulis. I'm an associate professor in urban economic development at the Bartlett Development Planning Unit at UCL, and I will be moderating this session, which forms part of the Dialogue in Co-Production series of the European Union Horizon funded project Fairville. If you could type fairville.eu.org, you can find more information about the project. So this session forms part of this Dialogues in Co-Production series, which aims to bring together practitioners, academics, activists, decision makers, to engage in discussion, share perspectives, and explore the enabling factors and critical issues that make co-production possible. For those who are less familiar with this concept of co-production, co-production is a term that probably it's more used in English than in other languages. Drawing on some of the work that we've been doing, I'll give you one definition of co-production. Co-production in the urban context refers to the processes through which multiple actors, including residents, associations, professionals, researchers, public authorities, jointly produce spaces, projects, processes, and knowledge. So this involves shared decision making, mutual learning, the mobilization of resident skills, and a commitment to a more democratic, equitable urban governance. So in this spirit and in this context, today's dialogue in co-production focuses on the challenges that groups and citizens face when engaging in co-production. Think about under which conditions it's possible. And today we're going to think through particularly some of the lenses that we discussed also yesterday in previous panels. So environmental degradation, environmental inequalities. So building on some of the discussion we had yesterday also on waste, we aim to unpack how environmental struggles for co-production, which very often are marginalized or made invisible because of the very nature of the issue they confront, can be made more visible and hopefully better understood and therefore addressed. So the premise is that many of these processes are overlooked in dominant discourses, but also repressed by the state. Yesterday night we had there was another very good session organized by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation that touched upon repression by the state. And we will hear from different case studies. And as I said, yeah, so repressed by the states often because waste and environmental destruction occur at the margins of the city. So we have quite a lot of people who will intervene because as part of our project we have 8 labs in 8 different cities, and today we're going to hear from Cairo and Giza in Egypt, West Attica in Greece, Marseille in France, London in the UK, and we'll have Agnes Deboulet, the head of the project, discussing these different case studies. So through this dialogue, we hope to explore how these different experiences can be shared. We want to think about, some of the key factors that enable successful examples of co-productions and how others might learn from or exchange with these case studies. So I will, because it's a dialogue, I will pose some of the questions to our speakers and the labs, and there is a live stream. More people hopefully are connected online. But I'm going to read quickly a very short bios for all the participants, and then we'll start with questions. So we have Romani Badir, who is a globally recognized recycling expert and the secretary of the Association of Garbage Collectors Community Development in Cairo, advocating for the rights and recognition of the garbage collectors, the Zabalin. Ahmed Zaazaa, a researcher and urban designer specializing in spatial and climate justice in urban planning, housing and public spaces, and the co-founder of 10 Tuba, applied research on the built environment. Paloma Anger, who works for North-South Consultants Exchange, focusing on development and humanitarian program evaluation, financial inclusion and community co-production processes. And then Artemis Koumparelou, who is an architect and social geographer and a member of the West Attica Fairville Lab. And as part of Common Space, she has been involved in participatory design projects, spatial analysis studies, and participatory action research programs. Giorgos Velegrakis, who is assistant professor of environmental sociology at the University of Greece and founding member of Common Space. And then Hélène Froment from Marseille. Hélène, can you, activist focused on the right to the city and substandard housing based in Marseille. She's a member of En Centre-Ville pour Tous, a city center for all, and the collective des habitants et organisés du Troisième, a grassroots neighborhood group promoting community organizing and residents' rights. And then we have here in the front row the three members of the Fairville London Lab, Agnieszka Rolkiewicz, one of the directors of Co-Produce It, who has over 20 years experience in participatory approaches to community engagement and development. Saif Osmani, also a director of Co-Produce It and an interdisciplinary creative practitioner specializing in architectural design and fine arts, and Seema Manchanda, who is the third director of Co-Produce It, and she's also the chair of Debt for X, a South London Arts Festival, and chair of Action for Race Equality, and she has previous roles in arts management and town planning. And finally, our discussant today will be Agnes Deboulet, who is the professor of sociology at Paris 8 and the scientific coordinator of the Horizon Europe project Fairville. So I think altogether we have, 2 centuries of experience in co-production between the 10 of you. So hopefully we'll hear interesting stories. But I will start from you, Romani. So you're one of the leaders of the waste collectors in Cairo. Can you tell us how and why the Zabalin community has become more visible in recent years? And how do you navigate your relationship with other organizations involved in waste collection?
So first of all, just to say how the Zabalin became invisible for others, it depends on the quantity of the garbage collections that we are doing, and the recycling, even the method of recycling. We are collecting about and recycling about 11,000 tons a day. So from Cairo, and Cairo produces 20,000 tons a day. Even with our small methods to build our own recycling machines to do our work, we have 24 hours working, 7 days a week, no day of vacation. If anyone of a family wants a vacation, another one who will replace him for the work. So it became the most important place in the Middle East for the recycling, because you are doing and recycling about 90%. As we are doing, and as I used to do, if to give some of your experience to the others, some light to continue in the chain and to do the work. They must do it to without you. If you will be all the time there, it's not a good work, it's not useful work. They must do the work, the collection, the recycling, just show them the way to continue in your place. And that's what we are trying to do in Manshid Dahshur, to show them how the separation of the materials, of plastics, of metals, of anything else, and to show them where to sell their materials, maybe in the future, to begin with a recycling machine and to begin their work. Okay, thank you.
And can I ask you, in your community, what are the sort of main challenges that you are trying to overcome at the moment?
First of all, I can say our name, Zabalin. Zabalin, it's not our real name because it's attached to the garbage. Zabalin, the name is, the traduction is a garbager. And I am not a garbager, I am a cleaner. The real garbager are the others. Mm-hmm. So it's not me. Just to prove that we are doing something better and we believe in our work. I have my sons and my daughters are well educated, but they continue to work for the collection and recycling of garbage with me. No problem for that. Just to show, I can give you a small example of what we believe that we are useful for it. In my area, we are collecting and reselling 1,000 tons of carton a day. 1,000 tons of carton a day to the factories to recycle it and to reuse it. All of us know that the carton is coming from the trees. So it's completely organic. It can be recycled 1 million of time, no problem for that. But for me, as a garbage collector, as a zabal, as they say, I can say that I'm protecting at least 3,000 tons of trees not to be cut in a day. So I'm protecting something which producing oxygen for the human being. So I am useful.
Thank you, Romani. Turning to you, who work in Giza, not too far from Cairo, could you describe how visible or invisible the issue of waste really is in the communities where you work? I remember when I came to visit you, on the one hand, waste, was everywhere in some of the areas where we observed, but on the other hand, it seems that waste is very much invisibilized. It's really made invisible in all the kind of political discourses and also on a very material level. So how do you manage these tensions?
Okay, I will start. As you said, it's a very visible issue. If you just come to Manshid Dahshur, you will see the waste in the irrigation canal, you will walk in the street and you will see the accumulation of waste. So, of course, it is visible, but it's, I would say the issue, of course, there is a invisibilization of the responsibility of the public services to address it. And we can see that, like when we were doing the co-production process, we of course met the head of the district to discuss with him, because to put a context, in Manshid Dahshur we're trying to co-produce solution about waste management, because mostly the residential waste is not really well, is uncollected, which is create a lot of environmental issues. So we discussed with the head of the district, and to be honest, he was saying, okay, if you want to do and work on this, it's an issue we have. So we wanted to engage him in the process because anyway, at the end, we will need collaboration with him because it's public responsibilities, it's a public service. And it's true that at the beginning the spirit was mostly, okay, trying a solution with the private sector. If the private sector will do it, it will be great because we don't have budget and don't have time. So if there is, you find a solution with private that could be affordable for us, it will be good. So in a way, at all level, I don't see, for example, for the will to be more to have more responsibility in fixing the issue. And when I can see for small things were done, for example, you have like from Cairo 45 minutes of road to go there, and you are like going on the road along the Mariotea Canal, which is an irrigation canal. And if you also take this road, you will see waste along the street next to the irrigation canal. Since we started the project 3 years ago now, we used to see the waste, but now they are building like small walls. So actually, if you are on the street riding, you start to see less of bit of the waste because you just don't see the irrigation canal because there is a wall. And it's funny because this road actually are going to the three pyramid complex in the three villages who are on this road. So Darchour, of course, where we are working, and also Saqqara and Darchour. So, like we were discussing with Ahmed about what is the reason of building this wall, but for me, my understanding was actually to preserve the view for the tourists who are coming, so they don't see this issue and it won't be more comfortable and pleasant for them to be in the area. But this kind of way to fix is not fixing the issue, it's just covering, but it's not addressing the issue for the community who is living there. And I will let you add.
Yeah, thank you, Paloma. Adding to that, I think also from the point of view of the community, it's something that they don't approve or they're not happy with. However, it's not something that it's being seen as oh my God, there are huge piles of garbage between the houses, because this is a case that it's representing a lot of other areas. I'm speaking, Egypt has now 4,500 villages. It's fair to say that all of these villages are suffering from the same thing. Not only villages, also informal areas, traditional neighborhoods, and so on, are still also facing this. So it's something that it's becoming part of the daily life, and this can make it invisible for the people. It doesn't mean that they are that they approve it, but it's becoming really part of the daily life. And maybe here, what's talking to the government, there is of course a capacity issue, as Paloma was mentioning, and the other issue is that being in these positions of decision-making positions, it's always like something that it's very temporal, and every decision maker, they want to leave their offices with as less problems as possible. So as much as possible, they are always like trying to just make things look okay. But I mean, here maybe the invisibility here is more for the villages themselves. The villages themselves are invisible. The government, they see the garbage and they don't have the capacity to deal with it. Yes, and this is why a community like in Manshiat Nasser, represented by Romani, are super important, because this is the informal sector that's taking care, that's doing the job that the government should have been doing. But generally, of course, there is a systemic problem dealing with villages as places to take food from, to take cheap labor from, but not to give back anything. The villages are under. There are always very, very limited budgets, very limited investments are going to the villages, and the garbage is one of the things, aside to other public services, that are totally also totally invisible to the government as well.
Can I add? This point?
Of course.
There is, I think, for me, who's was born and raised in France, there was something was striking me when we were in Manchet Darshur. It's also how it started to be invisibilized also in the community, as a problematization as a public issue. Because in Manchet Darshur, who is representative of what is actually happening in a lot of peri-urban agglomeration and rural areas, the public services are very almost, they are there but really not functioning and inexistent. So you actually don't have experience public services. So it starts to create a situation you're really not really expecting about receiving any services that you have right to have basic services in your city. So in the way when we were trying with the community to think about what could be the solution, even the way they were seeing the issue, it started the responsibility of the public authorities on dealing with the problem start to be also invisibilized. Of course they say yeah, they are not coming, they are not collecting. But quickly you start to really talk and want to know what's the issue, and they start actually to talk about behavioral issue. Yes, the issue that people are doing this, so we need maybe to be a bit authoritarian, we will put camera and we will punish people who are throwing the waste in the wrong canals. And even coming from youth, who are youth, who I think the most activists we've met, people who are gathering every week to try to raise the issue of the city. When we talk and what is the issue about waste, they say, oh, it's about awareness. People, they don't care about the nature, so they are not enough educated. So we need to do awareness session. And to me, I was a bit struck by this. And I think this is also a huge issue about the invisibilization of the issue, that also it's normalizing the situation and invisibilize any public accountability, actually, for the issue.
Thank you very much. Thinking now about Westatica, I mean, yesterday we had a really great panel. We heard many testimonies about people living close to the landfill in Westatica, and I know you've been there, so you're aware of what Romani, Paloma, and Ahmed talked about. So, what do you see as the main barriers to building a united front in Westatica to address the environmental inequalities that you've identified, documented, and how does the state respond? Does it help? Does it ignore it? Or does it simply pretend not to see what's happening?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alessio. Yesterday, as Alessio said, we had a discussion about Westatica, and we said a lot of details about this place and especially about the waste processes there. Just briefly, I repeat that we are talking about probably the biggest landfill in Europe that unfortunately address all the needs of the metropolitan area of Athens. Only one landfill gets all the waste that is produced by almost 5 million people of Athens. So to answer your question, I see 3 barriers, having in mind the big picture as I described before. Number one is, and again connected with what we heard at the first day of this conference, of the different scales. So we have a problem that is a totally environmentally injustice issue in the area that is not produced there. So it is a problem of the periphery, it is a problem of a national level, and people there feel totally that is something totally unjust because they are not producing it, they are not part of the problem, but they have to face all the consequences. And this is number one. There are different scales that play the role of making it a bit invisible, as was described in the previous case in Egypt, in Giza. Because we know as Athenians, we we know that our waste is going to the Fili, but we don't know exactly how the people there are living, how is their everyday life. So this is number one. Number two is what Thomas, an activist in the area that is the founder of West Front, an environmental organization, socio-ecological movement in the area, that said yesterday that if the problem, the injustice issue is becoming bigger, the response is becoming smaller or shorter. And this is because you either get used to it or you think it's physical life. That I was born there next to a landfill, and I almost see it as a natural thing. It's not produced by people. It was there, it will be there, and I have to live next to it. So this is the second barrier, thinking of this injustice as something that is totally natural, that comes from nature, that comes from God, that comes, I don't know from where. And the third issue, and I give the floor to Artemis, the third issue, in my opinion, it has to do with the Greek state itself. It has to do with a state that people don't have that belief or that faith, that trust in the state that it's going to solve the problems, and I'm just leaving it here.
Yes. I'm thinking now that, now talking about Fili landfill and the broader area around it in Thriasio Plain in West Attica, there are also different layers and different levels of invisibility, first of all. So we're talking about an area where different social groups reside. So we have, for example, working class residents of Analiosia, this residential area near the landfill, and some other actually areas at the west part of Athens. But we also have Roma communities living very close, and especially in one case in the Nea Zoi settlement, which is more or less a camp. These people live very close to the landfill, and I think that part of the issue is also the relationship or non-relationship between these different groups. So socially the area is extremely fragmented, and this, I believe that this is a top-down process, that there are, I don't know if I should name it conflicts among the groups, but there is also a tendency that the most marginalized, and in this case we're talking about the Roma people, are also the ones that in a natural way, again, are perceived as, sometimes are perceived as the responsible ones for the situation. And so, just to give a bit more of a context, the Roma communities in the area are mainly working with waste. So they are the informal recyclers, as named by another activist that we have been a lot in contact. They are the last part of the waste management chain. They are fully invisibilized, and the way they live, their culture is actually in many cases also in the area, and it's a very indicative example, Aspropyrgos municipality, and unfortunately also the residents in Aspropyrgos. They have very much discriminative approach against these people. Now, this is one point I wanted to raise, and another thing now, more related to the state and its role. In West Attica, in Philly, the waste management is actually lies on an interplay among different levels of governance. So it's the region with a special agency that somehow manages the collection of waste and the collection also of funds that should be paid by all the other municipalities of Attica, so that they're kind of allowed to send their waste to Philly. And there's also the municipal level in Philly that comes to agree on the successive expansions of the landfill, the continuous operation, and so on. And as the activists in the area have highlighted several times, part of the problem is the clientelism and the corruption. So somehow in Philly, since a very long time, since maybe over 10, 20 years, it has been established as a regime of silence. So people don't fight against what's happening there. Do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Shall we swap so we hear also from Marseille and London, and then I will come back to all of you with a final general questions to start making sense of all the kind of similarities across the cases. Okay. And so here we heard from the Giza Lab and the West Attica Lab, and now we'll hear from Marseille and from London. The cases are slightly different in that we heard more about waste, while here we will be talking more about environmental different environmental inequalities also related to housing. So now to you, Hélène. Can you describe what are the main environmental challenges in Marseille, in the neighborhood Belle de Mai, and how this came to become visible in your work of co-production? And so also what are the challenges of bringing environmental inequalities to the forefront of the struggles, including struggles for housing?
Agnès will begin to talk about Marseille, and after we focused on La Belle de Mai. It's a neighborhood in Marseille, okay?
Yeah, because it's a Fairville lab, so it's a joint participatory action research between civil society organizations and university. So we are always working together, hand by hand, hand in hand. So to start with the general context on environmental inequalities, if you can move slide. Okay, wonderful. I'm sorry because the light is just, it's very, very... Yeah, I like to. Non, je vais le faire. I will do it. Yeah. Comme ça, je verrai. Tu le fais. Yeah. Okay, this is just a general map of heat island effects in Marseille. which is very prevalent in the city center, one of the densest city center in France, actually, and as most of Mediterranean cities and coasts highly affected by heat and very rapid increase of air and temperature. So we also have rising inequalities due to the fact that it's the city in France with the less, let's say, green spaces, 1.8 square meter by inhabitant, which is 10 times less that were recommended, and many other things of pollution, support, cruise activities that are rising in the world, and especially in this part of the world. And we have this wonderful mapping done by colleagues at Aix-Marseille University of relation between income and housing problems, and we will see that there is a very clear overlap between heat island effects and tunnel effects, of course, and also housing problems, which are very strong in Marseille. So to come to... Vas-y, tu veux?
Okay. I will continue. So, La Belle de Mai is in the 3rd district, and above 50,000 people in the 3rd district, and about 15 in La Belle de Mai. And a lot of unemployed people, and a lot also of people with no good papers. And 51 people living under the poverty limit. So we observe a dense neighborhood, 201 inhabitants per square meters, and as you can see, Agnes said, there's not enough public spaces, and especially green public spaces, but in the 3rd district, and especially in La Belle de Mai, it's particularly true. There's a lot of waste, not so much as in Giza, but we see a lot of things like that, and a lot of cars, because public transportation is not so comfortable and not so easy to get. So, okay.
So there is embedded challenges in the neighborhood itself. That with it's a very left. It's pericentral, I will say, and it has recently been incorporated into a very large national interest project called Euro-Méditerranée that is lasting since 20 years and increasing constantly its perimeter. So, and this added to, we now like to focus on the general context of a city that has been traumatized by the collapse of buildings in the city center in Noailles in 2018 with 8 people dying. And following this trauma, let's say there have been numerous evacuations of dangerous private buildings, even in La Belle de Mai. Demolition is now targeting also large social housing estates because there is huge regeneration projects. And then we have a project of tramway that is also, it's the first time, I mean, at least in France, that a tramway is going to destroy so many buildings that 150 households are going to be evicted. So it also shows a kind of institutional violence or planning violence that this neighborhood is undergoing. Ok, je ne sais pas comment on fait pour passer. Ok.
Well, we can just, well,
tu veux que je continue là-dessus?
It's the partnership project, planning partnership project, but I think I will just to imagine the issues. And especially, as we said, it was focused on housing and inequalities, just to show the landscape of the project. Sorry. So what is interesting is what we do in reality and what co-production but maybe may I talk to co-production, because we shared observation, so outside observation, walking together, and that revealed the bad, the dreadful, as it said, housing conditions, and the lack of public spaces, the overcrowded pavements because cars always parked on the pavements, things like that. And this co-production allowed us to go further, and after we have, but I think it will be the other one. Oh, okay. We have a housing survey about the real condition of life of people, but in the point of view of residents, of inhabitants, not at the public authorities did it. So as you can see, there's a lot of insects, rats, there's a lot of humidity. And energy precarity, we focus on that because there's state policies about that. So in Marseille, in winter it's too cold and energy is very expensive and people are poor, so they don't use their heat because it's too expensive. And in summer it's too hot, and well, I guess I will, because just maybe I can enlighten this point, because a long time ago in Marseille there was a 3 windows structure, the building, and it was natural ventilation, but owner shared this apartment in small apartments, so no more natural ventilations. So people are suffering, and because a lot of them are overcrowded, they're suffering of heat. And in our survey, we observed that there's a lack of knowledge about what happens, what is the urban planning, and the tenants' rights. Sorry. Okay, we organize a lot of public meeting, and we had a very important public restitution and a special co-training, and that was interesting because we shared knowledge of users, of inhabitants, and knowledge of professional, of PhD, and a lot of different people. And we arrive with sharing this knowledge to get a better understanding of what happens, and to enforce the inhabitants. Oh. And the question of visibility, I think, because what is the issue of visibility is really important, because often the urban planners have a technical view of what is really happened in this situation, and they don't have the perspective, the view of the inhabitants, of the tenants. And we enlighten the situation, the strong situation of people, and we try to get a rendezvous with the public authorities to advocacy for advocacy of these situations, because we are really worried about people who suffered during a long time of really bad situation and been evicted by this new situation because they have no the good papers or they are not enough money and so on.
C'est la fini?
Okay.
Je sais pas si c'est... Non, il y a encore une diapo.
Okay.
Okay.
And maybe what...
This is the last one.
Yes, and a very strong issue is to make the situation more sensitive than only technical, because there's a lack of politic perspective in Marseille. The answer is often technical, not political. So that's a strong issue for us.
Thank you very much, Hélène and Agnes. I'll ask another follow-up question after we finish our round. So finally, now turning to London, and thinking about something slightly different, which is food, food markets, food poverty, food co-ops, and planning. Some of your work around food markets and food cooperatives provide an alternative to the very pressing issue of food poverty in the UK. How do these initiatives address this while also building collective forms of co-production and care? And you have a... Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you. So the London Lab...
Be closer, please. Yeah.
The London Lab actually has several projects. So the first project we'll hear from has a bit more in common with Marseille in that it's about a housing shortage in an area called Brick Lane, and Saif will explain how we got involved with the residents of Brick Lane, and it actually did start through work with food markets and meeting the community, but it became about housing. Then we'll hear from Aga. She's going to talk about food poverty in Clapton, and then I'll summarise at the end. Where's this ticket going?
You had to probably point it there. Okay.
So, hi, my name's Saif. The Save Brick Lane campaign, which started in around 2020 during lockdown, was because mainly we're talking about an area of East London, which is the furthermost edge to the city. So traditionally and historically, it's always given people who have working class background a step up into the city. And what you're seeing in front of you is actually one of the yards of what is the Truman Brewery, which used to historically employ quite a lot of working class people, probably in quite dire conditions, because there were a lot of clearances of working class areas which were moved out of London. But these empty semi-industrial areas have now become very hip places, culturally very strong on all sorts of fronts, from contemporary architecture, arts, visual arts, right the way to street art and graffiti and so forth. And fast forward 4 years, what we've done is we've been following this planning process really, and what we do on the Just Space Network, which is an umbrella group of about 80 planning-based community groups, is that we track and compare information between all the different groups to try to figure out common solutions that can then be enacted in the planning system, which is what we've been doing. And since October, if you look at the model at the bottom there, that blob of butter, as someone described as, is what they're trying to develop for the site. But what we're finding is that there's a real lack of housing, and in fact the community have been so marginalized, and in particular the Bengali Sylheti community who've been embedded there for the last 40 years or so have not been at all considered, whereby street markets, for example, have not been considered. They've reduced by a third the size of the street market. So they ultimately, the access to these spaces and the lack of affordability of these spaces really denies people the dignity of place. And that's where the Save Reclaim becomes this complex layer of housing, markets, street markets, other issues like gentrification and so forth. So since October, we've been doing grassroots mobilizations, public awareness campaigns. We've really had to go into the community and look at, for example, women who might be wearing the burqa and so forth. They might not have been listened to, so we brought them into the process to come and speak from their lived experiences, because often where street markets allow access for certain communities to buy affordable food, these markets are unfortunately turning into high-end sort of boutique brands and kind of pop-up markets, which are being replicated across London and across areas of gentrification across the city, which are very mobile, whereas if you look at the traditional embedded markets, they've got a history of being there for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. So what we did was the advocacy. We as a campaign, took that on, and what we found was the main issues affecting our communities were the policies, and how do we get people involved into the policies. So we raised money to become a Rule of Six party, which the planning process, UK planning process, allows where a government inspector comes down and tries to hear evidence, and obviously giving evidence is very different to giving actual sort of planning law-based evidence. So we asked people to just give their lived experiences, so that all of that had to be considered. And within a week, the Secretary of State and the government stepped in to make a decision, and they've now taken the decision on Queen's Market, which includes a data centre, which no one hardly knew much about, retail, office space, and just 6 affordable homes for local people, whereas all the successive master plans over decades have always said we need housing on site, and certain places like street markets need to be protected. So really what you find is structurally within policy there's all of these controlling factors which then give the impression that somehow there is some form of consultation which isn't really there. So obviously we're a coalition group, so we've got local people, we've got different organizations. We found old English heritage groups have mixed with the young Bangladeshi groups, and we're realizing that we're all under threat, in fact. In fact, everything local is under threat for this land grab and large-scale takeover of land by politicians, possibly banks, more likely the landowners and developers who make these decisions behind closed doors and barely consider us. So we're working right now with the Just Space Network to come up with our own alternative London plan, which is looking at care structures.
Hi guys, so I've been working in Clapton, another area of London which is very deprived. It's predominantly Orthodox Jewish area, but with a lot different community living kind of in silos in a state. There are kind of with a little infrastructure, although there is like church that provided a place for a weekly lunch club for elderly and vulnerable people predominantly. Otherwise, there is threat all over. First of all, there are 10 schools has been closed in 2 last years in Hackney. A lot of supermarkets, so local supermarket, like the only place almost to go to also was closed. And due to that, like the use of food banks all over Hackney, I mean London, England, but specifically in Hackney, there are like queues to food banks, and a lot of these food banks were in schools as well. So once school is closed, then food bank is not having any place to really support local people. So like kind of wanting to respond to all this like increasing inequalities really. As a community animator, I help like this vulnerable really group of people, but supported by some local volunteers to establish the food co-op that enable really not being reliant so much dependent on state provision or even the anchor organization that often doesn't really fully understand the complexity of needs, and somehow the funding that possibly should be kind of supporting community is not visible and doesn't come to us. It comes more to like medium organization that deliver more for corporate service. So through the establishment of this food co-op, we really believe that the agency of this disempowered community can raise, and it's within like few months now we have over 50 members, and single moms with quite different needs are planning to set up their own co-op, quite different than the one that is now providing mostly fresh fruit and veg and bread that become like such a how to call it, luxury. Bread is luxury in London actually. So we also supported like there is local commons, and next to it it was a toilet that was turned into cookery school, around which there was garden that becomes abandoned. And so from food co-op we kind of helped also with establishing community-led garden, that the food can be grown, not necessary to more educate like and enable people to have more agency over the spaces outdoor, but also see how really food chain is happening. So we collaborate, we collaborate with local campaigns like Right to Food and Right to Grow, and I kind of seen like in Hackney things are developing quite slow. So through, again, our co-production networks, we were able to collaborate cross boroughs with Tower Hamlets and Newham on strengthening this positive models, and we're running currently a series of like events where we gathering all these people interested in models of food security. Recently it was about a French model actually that Marseille is working with. It's called Food Security System based on social contributions, and so we kind of work towards even more sustainable ways to address the food poverty.
This is just a picture of some of the key players in our London lab. So in London, the Fairville project hasn't just run one project. What we've done is we've found different co-productions across London, and we've been either advising them or giving them tools to help them build their projects. So you've only heard from two, really, Brick Lane and Clapton. But what we found with all of them is essentially the social issues aren't being addressed by the current system, the capitalist system. And I really like the academic work of the feminist economic geographer Catherine Gibson, who uses the visual metaphor of the iceberg to debunk the capitalist-centric vision of the economy. So essentially, this is a very simple iceberg up here, everything above the blue line is visible, is capital, is the market, is traded, is valued. And everything below the line is unaccounted for labour, feminine care work, gift economies, non-monetary exchange, and is co-production when it doesn't involve the institutional partners or the capitalist partners. So it's a lot of the types of co-production we've been seeing in London. And I think I find this to be the consistent issue is how do we actually create the co-production that works both above and below the line and brings more above the line. So what the London Lab does is really try to work to empower stakeholders, to improve collaborative governance mechanisms. These are all barriers that sometimes get in the way. To provide knowledge exchange, to share understanding of legal approaches that can be used, of social approaches that can be used, and to bring those connections of the sort that Aga was talking about. If it's being done well in one area, can we bring it to another part of the city? So we foster dialogue, we deliver knowledge exchange, and we try to work on joint problem solving. And this is just, the top picture is us in one of the markets. In fact, Hélène is in the picture. And then the bottom picture is one of our dinners where we're trying to share and exchange knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we can give a round of applause to all the labs and all the work amazing work that you're doing. Giorgos, how much time do we have? 20 minutes? Max 20 minutes. Okay. So I wanted to ask maybe another round of questions to all of you, but maybe what we can do is I want to hear at least 5 minutes from Agnes, if you would like to maybe try and help us think through these different labs, and also think about what do you think could be ways in which we can learn from each other, exchange between these different cases, but also what are some of the cross-cutting principles, enable factors that emerge from thinking through these cases, and then we'll open up maybe with a question.
I'm sorry, because Alessio, to be frank, I didn't prepare anything for these comments, but because we were focusing on Marseille was a little bit. Okay, but just to say that there is obviously some difference between the two first presentations and the two second. I guess that, especially in the case of Giza, we are focusing on basic services issue, really, which is not exactly the case of Attica, which is more environmental inequalities, typical environmental inequalities, strong, sharp, entrenched, and London and Marseille that have maybe more to share in terms of housing inequalities that are fueled, in fact, by globalization, touristification, in investment that is very striking in the case of Marseille. So it's not exactly, of course, the topics are quite different, and we don't speak about the same level of vulnerability collectively. So if we say 50, and because access to public services is obviously very different, and the level of toxicity of the environment is very different as well. So I think we heard different things in terms of visibility and invisibility, and thanks to Alessio for thinking this right to visibility session as well. We heard Romani saying, for example, we have the right to be visible as cleaners, not as Zebelin, which means collecting garbage. And I think this is an important issue, of course, of wording, because we see that in all this, we guess that in all these neighborhoods, and we know that from West Attica, there is a lot of labelization that is giving stigma. And as Sylvie Tissot a French politician, says words can kill. Words are actually killing, and this is the first source of inequality. So we have to be very cautious as social scientists, to be very cautious about the word we are using when we speak about things, and especially of the others. And so, okay, so there is a very important, a huge importance to get out of this categorization, very dichotomic and stigmatization. We also heard that, in fact, okay, to quote also maybe John Turner, to collect Zabel, to collect garbage is like, or as informal housing, it's more solutions than a problem. You can see one way or another thing, but we can also balance this way. And we see this is also the case for informal collectors in West Attica. They are more of a solution than a problem, but of course they are seen as I don't know, dirty people, not recommendable. I mean, with people with problems, in fact. And I think. But the lecture, what we see that is cross-cutting all these cases, including the north, because Marseille is in the north, despite everything, yes, global north, let's say, we see that there is a growing, I mean, feeling of normalization. This normalization and individualization, I'm sorry for my... if it's not comprehensible in English, there is public policies, it's very clear, are always individualizing the problems, the issues. It's much more simple, and we always mention it in the case of waste. Of course, it's more simple to say, okay, reduce your water consumption, throw your garbage in the right trash, than to say, okay, total or big corporates should stop producing shit and inducing us to bad behaviors in terms of overconsumption. Of course, we know that, and this is very similar to all countries. I mean, it's very striking that in the case of Egypt, there is also individualization of problems, rather than thinking from the side of structural issues, public policies, lack of public policies. But I think that we have also to see the big picture, and the big picture is that the level of inequalities is structurally very different. Egypt has one of the highest inequalities in the world, actually, which is not the case. I mean, London is quite high as well, but it's not the same solution. So it means that decision makers in some countries live in very tiny bubbles. It's a hyper-segregated society. It makes very feasible to live in your own bubble. And as Ahmed has shown yesterday, you can live in this expansive expansion of the city, always expanding huge space without anybody, and green space and golf, and without seeing the misery of the majority that has no access to to decent public services, or even no public service at all. So, and governance is also reflecting that. We should need in Egypt to have elected local authorities, which is not the case. I mean, this is also why villagers are mistreated, are badly treated. It's because there is no accountability at all, and these people don't represent anything. Whereas even in cities, you can represent a bit because you are nearer to the power in a way. Okay, so the big picture is quite different, and I think that reject of the garbage, of the waste, of the refuse, in fact, to peripheries is not a new story. It has always been the case in every city in the world. But the thing is that the magnitude of the development of our cities and the sharp rise of our consumption, which is completely delirious, I mean delirant, in the north, especially, or of the elite, makes it completely uninhabitable for most of the people. If you go to Giza 10 years ago, to Dashur, you wouldn't see that canals, literally, you know that Egypt is made of canals of irrigation because of this pharaonic tradition. Piles, we speak about 2-3 meters of pile of garbage in the canals irrigation. Okay, so how can you get rid of that, of the systemic condition of inhabitability, and in the case of West Attica, I was joking yesterday, but why don't you get also new nuclear plants, for example, to complete your very nice panorama of all the refuse in the world? It will be also so yeah, visibility and invisibility play together, but have to see also with this different kind of context of inequality, general national inequalities, governance that has to also to be followed. Then the other thing, and I will stop there, that we want to emphasize was that visibility was made also through co-production, and co-production can help maybe a tiny bit to open a window for visibility of these housing and environmental inequalities. And this is the thing that we are brought here to reflect together. We see that in many countries where participatory governance has been implemented, is really sometimes in the rise. For example, I guess in Greece, I don't know, in Egypt, in development programs, or in the I mean, typically in France, in London, we see that participatory governance is often failing. Democracy are in crisis, that's for sure. Participatory governance was sought as a solution for democracy. It was invented for that, in fact. It was enforced by governments 30 years ago to save democracies, literally. And it is also failing. Why? Because we have been training thousands of professionals of participation, but these professionals are not independent. They are working for public authorities or local authorities that have political agendas different, not there to solve structural inequalities at all. So the question we have been asking now is how co-production can help in a way a bit to rethink the possibilities that participation can help move as a cursor and move in the good direction for the sake of the majority. But it's of course a discussion to have. And there is many barriers and many obstacles. One of the main barriers and obstacles is disinformation and discouragement of the many in front of this accumulation of problems. Yes.
Yes. I think so. So, is co-production about saving participation and therefore saving democracy? Maybe. Yeah. Thank you. We have, I think, a space for some questions. I wanted to ask all of you some reflection based on your experiences about, and I wanted to ask you whether you have like some key insights about making environmental struggles, its different forms, more visible through co-production, and how this could help us learn from each other. But maybe we can open up to the floor. So if you would like to ask some questions, make a comment, share maybe your experience, engage or reflect with some of the things you've heard, maybe we collect 2 or 3 points. Yes. And please feel free to tell who you are. Yeah.
Hi.
If you are active in any organization, yeah. Thank you.
I should mention where I'm working, or
sure. If you can mention your name, where you're from. Okay. You're part of an organization. Yeah.
I'm Milena Rössner, and I'm working for RWTH University Aachen in Germany on living labs research, actually, and that's why I'm wondering, since you mentioned that you try to transfer the co-production approaches in London to other projects? Like, did you use any specific research approaches for that or methods to transfer the knowledge that you also gained in one case to another case?
Thank you. Maybe we collect another 2 points and then we, yeah?
Yeah.
Would you like to ask make a comment? Okay, yeah? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, hello. I'm Marietta. I'm a sustainability consultant. I've been working in London for some years, so just a plain professional. I noted what you said about people not realizing their rights and not understanding them. And thinking about Joanna Mace's 3 dimensions of change, system knowledge, new systems, and a shift in consciousness, I wanted to ask you, in your experience, how the process of co-production may have shifted, the core beliefs and values and the worldview of people involved, and whether that's the strongest, whether that's where its strength lies until, the other systemic barriers can be uplifted. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe space for another one? Okay, then Agnes. And please also Ahmed, Romani, anybody who's spoke before, please feel free to engage and respond.
It's a very small point to be made, but it's about PFAS. Eternal pollutants. PFAS are invisible, okay? Many of us don't know about PFAS. It's a very recent discovery. It's maybe the most terrific point about environmental violence, that all these companies have been shutting their mouth about this production since these thousands of eternal pollutants since so many years. And okay, I think it's a good example of also invisibility, and that we have to reveal. I mean, yeah. Why is it not known?
Okay, thank you for the question to London. So the communities in London that are struggling with the greatest issues tend to be poor, busy, time poor, and knowledge poor. So when a major issue happens in their area, firstly, it's great if they manage to coalesce around the issue in the first place. But secondly, usually once that happens, if they're trying to work it out on their own, it takes them a very long time to make the amount of progress they need to make. So what the lab in London is trying to do, and what we do in our own projects, is try to find other similar examples or other things that have worked and share that with the groups so that they can move faster. And quite often, when you're under an environmental pressure in the UK, it's because there's a decision that has to be made, and the community will often find out about it late. And then they'll be under the race against the clock because the authorities will be making the decision, and their period for engagement can be very limited. So this knowledge sharing and exchange of understanding is absolutely critical. But we're also working more long term to build networks all the time with interested parties, and we're often working around planning policy for what's called the London Plan, which is the entire city plan, and we're working with groups to share knowledge of the existing policies, but also find out what the groups would need to be better policies, and then lobbying the Greater London Authority to try and change their policies. And then I think the next question was about, is this the way forward? I have to be honest, I'm sometimes quite cynical about the ability of these processes to work. I think they're the one thing we've got: co-production, group voice, increasing democratic power. But sometimes I think that we're fighting bigger enemies of capitalism, corporate power, state power, And so, you know, we have to hold hope, but sometimes I don't always know if it's the right solution.
Yeah, I think also the question about raising and shifts in consciousness, values, core beliefs. I think could be applied very much also to the case in Marseille and maybe also in Giza when you start working through with co-production.
Yes, and I can add about sharing experiences and especially other experiences. I remember one time when we organized co-training sessions, we had a lot of different approaches, and it was very interesting to hear together other experiences. And I remember inhabitants I know, they said, wow, it gave us hope. You know, because sometimes you feel so bad because you gave a lot of energy to fight, and not to fight, but you hope to co-produce with, as in Marseille, we hope to co-produce with public authorities, and we observed that it was so difficult, because as I said, no more political, I mean in urban planning, no more political people and sharing experience is important, and also sharing knowledge. I remember a session we invited a young woman. She had a thesis about different landlord, and in Marseille we have a slum landlord, and we talk about different kind of landlords, and they are not slum landlord, but they consider that housing is a value, and people didn't know that, and that was very interesting to touch this kind of approach, and people have more knowledge nowadays, so it's important. Co-production is something like that for me.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think one of the correlations between the Marseille group and the London group is that the area we're looking at is also suffering from a lot of housing issues. And again, there's not enough resourcing. And what I found from my few days in a housing association, a very small one, is actually we've got to be careful and really careful and very critical when we start to emulate corporate processes, thinking they're the right things to do for our communities. And what I mean by that is often we see something and it's never the same thing. For example, you might look at something and see it as a successful image of something, but it's not the right thing for your community. And that requires an entire process or a shift. And similarly, if you look at the art world, for example, and here in Athens, what you can see is certain areas are possibly going through a tipping point of where, for example, decisions are being made so much so behind closed doors that areas are changing so much that they then start to take on someone else's lifestyle and not the lifestyle and the lives of the inhabitants themselves. So we start to emulate something. So I think if we're replicating for another city, for example, if we think something's successful, it still has to largely have a feedback loop within it, which says we are creating something, and we've continued to have that dialogue within those communities to understand what makes that context and those communities unique. Otherwise, what you end up with is a whole bunch of international brands which then swallow that very work that you've done. So I think the attack on the ground is multiple levels if you're looking at co-production in its truer form from a grassroots level up.
I can add to this, because I think that co-production is a mean where we we don't know exactly what's the outcome. It's incremental and it's organic process that develops with the work, and with this incrementation, actually, it unfolds more and more issues that we would have never noticed or understood on our own, and also I think it plays another role, because it plays the role of recognition, because in the context of Egypt, for example, it's been decades where the people are being provided services from political parties, provided services from international NGOs, provided services from whatever who are provided services that are backed up with a lot of agendas, and the idea that the people to be put in a place that no, actually your opinion and your input in deciding what exactly do we want to do, not only, okay, we're doing here this and give me your opinion. No, it's co-deciding what will happen. I think also it gives a lot of feeling of recognition to the people, and this is it's a challenge actually, because it doesn't come easily. In a lot of times you need to really to say it more and more that no, it's something that we will do together, because the people, they got used to the idea that there are experts who knows what should provide, and we are being provided with the stuff. Of course, it's always a question of sustainability. Most of these projects that are being directly provisioned for services, of course, they don't sustain, because they didn't dig deep enough to understand what do the people really, how the dynamics, the power balances, how do the people deal, what exactly do they need. Because in a lot of cases, what's being provided is not the core issue that the people are really waiting for. So I believe it's in my personal point of view, I think it's a very important way out, especially as you were saying, you were mentioning the real participation. And I think co-production it's a level of participation. But participation, of course, it varies between just consultation and until you reach co-production, until you reach self-management, where the people, they don't need even the experts, or they don't need the fund, which is the ultimate goal, of course. But I mean, like co-production as a level of participation, it's I think it's a way out, and it has to be more and more experimented and tested. Because yes, we have to also to make it clear that participation as a terminology for a lot of local communities, it's losing its meaning from the amount that it has been used just as a checklist, as a line in a big checklist of a lot of donors, and the people are really, they are started to disbelieve from the idea of participation. But I think co-production here, maybe it's a way to come to start fixing this, where people, they are from the beginning of the deciding what do we want to do, doing research together, planning together, designing together, putting a budget together, follow up with the implementation, and even take part in the evaluation and monitoring and after the project. So here there is really like a total different way of recognition for the local communities. Yeah.
Okay, so very final input from Aga, and then we'll come to a close.
I quickly wanted to touch on methods and maybe a little bit on this shifting of consciousness. So like kind of in capitalist world, the cooperatives are not really understood as a way forward. Everyone thinks they have to deal with the issues kind of through setting up maybe their own company, or they feel so disempowered that they think, like you said, we cannot fix that problem. But through using, for example, maps, where we try to emerge the net invisible kind of networks, so we make them more visible and make spaces for people from different expertise, so not only the top, but like community activists, growers, all kinds of community kitchens, people who have different expertise and can cross-pollinate. Really, this is, so I wanted to add that you know, different methods and gathering also different expertise, like really coming from bottom up rather than usually, you know, like parachuting as a solution. And sometimes it takes time, but as you said, it usually brings right solutions and very effective and not often like missed kind of solutions or misunderstood problems. So.
Thank you, Aga. Just to say two very quick things about also the project. One, which I think touches upon a question about dissemination. So we are in our at the end of year 3 of a 4-year project. We've done a lot of work documenting, mapping, networking, co-producing, and this year we are about to start even bigger work of trying to make sense of everything. So in the next year and a half, 2, we'll try to publish a lot of what we have found out. So Fairville EU.org is the website where you'll find a lot of our outputs and resources. And the second thing is that this is the 5th dialogue of such kind that we had, but we're launching a new series that it's called Dialogue in Co-Production Enabler Series. So really thinking about what are the enabling mechanisms, tools, ways in which we can strengthen and deepen co-production. The next one is going to be on the 14th, Thursday the 14th or 15th of January. And it will be online, so you can join from wherever you are. And finally, thank you very much for listening, and thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you.